CALL stands for Connecting Art and Law for Liberation. The goal of this weekend is to build a real community of artists, activists, advocates, formerly incarcerated and currently incarcerated folks to come together and to think critically and creatively about our call to action, which is ending mass incarceration.
So my name is Bobby Gordon, and I'm the co-professor of the Legislative Theater for Racial Justice class at UCLA. Students in this class are training in Theater of the Oppressed for legislative theater purposes, using theater to be developing new legislation around racial profiling and mass incarceration. And so today what's going to be happening, Breon Bain will be doing a section of his performance, Lyrics from Lockdown, and then following that, and this is the really exciting moment, students inside will be responding back with their own art. And this to me harkens back to Augusto Boal, who created Theater of the Oppressed, this notion of wouldn't it be amazing if dancers performed and then taught us how to dance?
I came down here because I want to see a couple things. One, I want to see the facilities that we're holding our youth in. And the second thing is I want to talk to some of the youth who've been determined to have gone arrived at law. And I want to make sure they know that people care and that people know that they matter.
When I look out into the room and I see these teenagers, I see my cousins, I see my brothers, I see my sons, I see my family, and I know they come from the same situations and circumstances that my own family has faced. So any opportunity that we have to come in and uplift them, to support them, to show them that we have love, to show them that they're loved, that they have people who see them as human beings who need to be celebrated and invited back to their communities as much as possible. I'm there. We're actually taking some of the words and stories that the young folks shared. We didn't have time for everybody to speak, but we brought in colorful index cards, asked them to write down their names, where they're from, what their biggest struggle is, what their resilience is, how they're resilient, and what their biggest need and their biggest dream is. And we got all of that from many of the young folks. And tonight we take that into UCLA to share with a larger audience. And Danny Glover and Jason George and Senator Holly Mitchell will be there. And hopefully we'll be able to use their words and their stories to actually shape the future of what's happening in the law in California and around the country.
When I come in, I just have a lot of hope, and hope that we really have changed a number of people's lives, and that there is hope outside, and this is a temporary situation. Even Danny Glover talked about his family members who've been incarcerated, and everyone's gone through struggles in life. Life is easy for very few people, and everyone has to go through things, and so you've got to be resilient and strong and have the love and feel the hope, and it's about support too, but a lot of that comes from within. I've been in facilities with 13-year-old boys, and my heart just breaks. 13-year-old boys who are just children.
When humanity is standing in front of you, it's hard to deny. When you're standing in front of a kid, when you say criminals are blah, 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 but then when you come into a facility and you look and there's a 16-year-old looking at you, he's a kid. He's a kid, and if you give him a chance, he'll be a kid. But if you decide that he's otherwise, he'll become otherwise.
I wish people would really think about how they're implicit, how they're involved in this system that is putting young people behind bars when they really shouldn't be.
So I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and when I started doing work at Rikers Island 15 years ago or so, New York's public schools put $10,000 to $15,000 a year per student into educating them. Meanwhile, Rikers Island was spending over $100,000 per student, per young person to incarcerate them. In California, they're spending over $270,000 per young person and had 9 13-year-olds locked up last year, So there's some deep work. Where we invest our resources says a lot about what we value, right? And if we value profit more than people, it's reflected in our budgets. It's reflected in the outcomes. It's reflected in what communities get served and what communities don't. And so I think we need to really begin evaluating ourselves on that level. The society is sick as a whole. It's sick, and it's not going to be made well again by simply trying to do more damage to people who have been broken by these systems that were designed to break us. Those systems actually may need to be broken and something better put in its place for us to actually address the harm that's been done. 2.3 million people incarcerated, 7 to 8 million who are under the jurisdiction of the criminal justice system through parole, probation, jails, prisons. 7 to 8 million people. Over 95% of those inside are coming home. Do you want them to come home with more education or less? More opportunity or less? With more ability to actually, re-enter their communities and be healthy participants and citizens in their communities, or less? That is the question. And if we do want to make sure folks are more prepared, we need to actually invest in their human potential rather than in their imprisonment. And that is why we're here.
John Q. Public sitting on his couch should care because it's your money. You can throw your money to try and dispose of human beings, or you can have that money try and uplift your community. And you can waste that money. You just ran down the numbers a minute ago. Exponentially more money spent to incarcerate people than it is to educate them. That's a problem. And so that if you want a return on your investments, if you pay your taxes, you want a return on your investment, that's a positive thing. There's no positivity coming out of just incarcerating as many people as you can possibly get, as you can stuff into a hole. There's no return on that investment.
Society's going to be judged by how you treat your children. And by that estimation, I don't know that we're doing so well.
People make assumptions about who you are based off of, a couple of basic facts about you. How old are you? What color are you? And what do I figure you're worth? And none of those things define who you are. And I think the conversation that we're having here, I think the conversation that I try to have in all my dealings with SAG-AFTRA is trying to remind people those assumptions are false. Those assumptions say more about you than they do about the person that you're judging. Art is your individual story, it's the story of the people, and so when they see a performance, when they get up and they get a chance to perform themselves, they see possibilities. You talk about options. I mean, it's knowing that if you end up in a place like this, it's because of one or two choices, and it may not be, it may not have been your choice at the time, but that choice doesn't define you. And every time you're exposed to people who are telling their story and you get an opportunity to tell your story, you realize I get to make choices now that are going to define who I'm going to be from here. And you're not defined by the choice you made 5 minutes ago or 5 years ago or 23 years and change ago. One thing that every human being wants is for their story to be told. And that story is told, at the end of the day, to the art that you create. How we're represented in media determines how we see ourselves as a nation. And that's really where I come from, is, when there have been papers written about, drawing a direct line from seeing a black president on television to seeing an actual black president, about seeing a women president on television to actually having the first viable female candidate. Those things go back and forth. And in the same direction, it works in reverse engineering. When every perpetrator of a heinous crime is depicted as being brown or black-skinned, as depicted as being a man, then that's reinforced that we believe that that's the case, and in the worst possible scenario, we believe that that's maybe who we are. You know what I mean? That there are young men who think, well, that's who I'm supposed to be. Art is about trying to be your better self. Right now, we're living in a world that is short on empathy. And going back to the idea of art telling your story, right now we're living in a world and people are actively trying to avoid hearing other people's stories. They make an assumption, if I hear you are a Republican, I make decisions about you and I don't want to hear your story. If I hear you're a Democrat, if I hear you're black, if I hear you're gay, if I hear you're, I make decisions about you. And I just wish that people right now stopped and actually listened to that person tell their story. Bottom line, listening is the first step to love. I mean, it's if everybody has a story to tell, and hate doesn't grow out of nothing. It usually grows out of, I need you to hear me, and I'm pissed because you're not.
A lot of what Jason touched on, immediately you could see had an impact on the young folks. We talked about being yourself and not allowing other folks to define you. You know, Toni Morrison has this great line, which I've sampled in the show. She says, definitions are for definers and not for the defined. This is the civil rights issue of our time. This is the human rights issue of our time. And 50 years from now, when your grand and great-grandchildren looking back and asking, what did you do to end the largest prison crisis in human history? You can either say, I sat on the sidelines and didn't do a damn thing, or I got involved. Not everybody's gonna storm the barricade. Not everybody's gonna, be an actor or a commissioner. Not everybody's going to be involved in quite the same ways, but there is a way for everybody to be involved. And so find out what that way is to end mass incarceration, to decarcerate, to bring prison education and prison abolition into the dinner conversation with your family and ask them, what are you doing to be on the right side of history?
Just get involved, go tutor, do mentorships, get involved with your boys and girls clubs, figure out what's happening in your community that could benefit from your assistance and your skills. Not everyone's good at hip hop or poetry or whatever, but you're good at something, and donate that time and that effort and that commitment to your community. You'll get more back than you get.
I've had people who looked out for me, who blessed me, who mentored me, who guided me, and I think that's made all the difference in my life.
Yeah, your impact can far outlast your years on this earth.
We're at the moment of a paradigm shift. We have to really move from punishment to public health, from punishment to public wellness, from punishment to thinking about possibilities and transforming this from the mess that we're in into the great possibilities that we have ahead of us.
I'm Danny Glover, and I care about what's happening at this prison, this facility, because these are my children.